kick us off?
Hello. Well, hi, I'm Sandra Rosner. I'm a critique partner, alpha reader, and general friend to Doug Walsh. It's wonderful to have you all here tonight. And it is amazing to be finally holding this, this book right here. God, it's been about 2 years since you first had this idea, right?
Well, I started outlining in 2019, but we go back about 16 years to when I first had the
Ooh.
idea for this book. Um, so yeah,
Well, hopefully everybody's picked up a copy at this point, but if not, we are going to drop links to where you can pick it up after the Zoom meeting, actually during the Zoom meeting. But let me introduce Doug first, and we'll go into a bunch of fun activities tonight. Doug Walsh is an award-winning and Amazon best-selling novelist whose books have earned consistent praise from critics and readers alike. Through his stories, Walsh combines his passion for adventure travel with a fascination for discovering how romantic relationships respond to the improbable. His latest novel, Shadows of Kalalau, is a coming-of-age romantic thriller set in a majestic, untouched corner of Hawaii. Following a 16-year career authoring video game strategy guides, Walsh set down his controller and embarked on the round-the-world bicycle tour that ultimately inspired his debut novel, Tailwinds Past Florence. Collectively, Walsh's books have sold over 2 million copies in dozens of countries around the world.
yay! Thank you, Sandra. Yeah, so no, that is me. So thank you all so much for coming. This is a little less than ideal. A couple years ago, when my debut novel came out, we had a big bash in North Bend, and drank a lot of beer and did a slideshow with lots of pretty pictures. But hey, it's a pandemic, so what are we going to do? But no, this is great. And this lets me bring in people from, as far away as I know there's some folks from New Jersey and Colorado and Arizona and across the wall next door, among other places. So, so yeah, thank you all for being here. I really, really, really appreciate that. And why not start it with a little toast? To all of you for joining. If you have an adult beverage or a Mai Tai, perhaps, I see some drinks. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Cheers.
It is, I don't, there's some authors who release like 2, 3, 4 short books a year, and I'm more of the one every 2 to 3 years kind of pace, a little bit bigger books. So it's worth a drink, in my opinion.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, has anybody here read the book yet, other than my critique partners?
Oh.
Okay. Well, it's pretty big, and it only just came out yesterday, so that makes sense. That's a good answer. So, Shadows of Kalalau is a coming-of-age romantic thriller. It features a 19-year-old girl from Honolulu who even though it's been almost a year since her mother passed, she's still really torn up about it. She's sick and dealing with her overbearing stepfather. So, but after graduating high school, she runs away to the Kalalau Valley, which is a real place on the Nepali coast of Kauaʻi. It's very rugged, very remote, and there has been a long history of squatters who've resided in this valley for decades, and then even going back to ancient Hawaiians who were there hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Malia falls in with a group of squatters, and her 2-week trip turns into a summer-long adventure. And unfortunately, by the time summer's over, 2 people are dead, and the police have her in custody because they believe she's the only one who knows the whereabouts of the killer. So most of the book is actually told kind of in flashback. You get these scenes that are in the police station interacting between Malia and Detective Gina Park. And then, she wants to know the whole story. She wants to know every last detail of how Malia spent her summer. So then it kind of kicks back and you get to experience the summer in real time with Malia until like the 2 timelines intersect around like chapter 20 or so. But can't tell you that much more because it is a thriller with a mystery element, and I don't want to give any spoilers. So.
Definitely don't want spoilers. This is having been part of the critique process. He managed to put surprises right until the very end. So, well, Kristen is going to go ahead and post the links to buy the book, either paperback, ebook, whatnot, in the chat for anybody who would want to run out and get that afterwards. Also, we're going to be having a lot of time in the end for viewer questions. So also wanted to announce that 3 digital copies will be given away to people who ask questions in the chat at the end of this meeting.
Yeah. There is one other contest that I have been running for the last month and a half. And it just so happens that there were 4 winners, and the grand prize winner is with us today. And that would be Miss Amy Lee. She won the Malia's necklace giveaway, which Kristen is actually modeling, and I got one right here. This is called a sunrise shell, and it's a pretty rare shell that is worth its weight in gold on Kalalau Beach. These things wash up on Kalalau and just like 1 or 2 other beaches on Maui. And when I finished my book and sent it to the copy editor, Sandra, who is a jeweler by trade, surprised Kristen with the gift of this necklace. And I said, you need to make me another one for my readers. And so Amy is going to win the necklace and sign copies of each of my books. And some other people who aren't here and I don't know are going to win paperbacks. So that was the main prize we were giving away today. But there's going to be another chance to win a signed paperback, and then of course some digital copies also. So congratulations, Amy.
Congratulations. All right, we're going to move right into just some questions for the author at this point, to learn a little bit more about his process and about the book itself. Everybody always wants to know, what's the inspiration behind the book that you spent 2 years plus all the time in your head thinking about? And how does an idea get to, get through all of that to become an actual novel? So you had you said 16 years earlier. So tell us a bit about your inspiration for it.
Okay. In 2005, I went to a friend's wedding in Maui. And as soon as the wedding was over, Kristen and I jumped on a plane, went over to Kauai, because I heard about this trail called the Kalalau Trail. It's 11 miles, point to point, ends at a really remote beach. The only way there legally is to either kayak in or hike. I mentioned legally because you'll see that Malia does not go legally originally. And so it's a really hard trail. National Geographic considers it one of the hardest, most challenging, most deadliest trails in the world. And it beat us to hell. Not gonna lie. Now I can do the trail in 5 hours, but when we did it in 2005, it took me 9 hours, wading through streams that were just, above waist deep. And there's parts of the trail where it gets really narrow. And if you step off, you're going to fall 300 feet into the Pacific Ocean. So when we got to the beach, we were so tired. All we did was shower and then just kind of like sit around on the sand. And I noticed that there was this group of squatters. They were hanging out under blue tarps, smoking joints, playing bongo drums. And then at sunset, like 1 or 2 of the women got up and just completely nude, started doing Tai Chi at sunset. And I was like, this is a pretty wild place. Word spread throughout camp that because the trail was so hard, you could pay these folks to take you out by Zodiac in the morning. And morning came and Kristen and I were dreading the thought of hiking back out along this trail. It was super windy. And there was a section back then, it's been repaired, but the trail was missing. It was crumbled. And so it was like actual gap in the trail that you had to step sideways over just nothing. Like it was, and I remember crossing it and just thinking like, okay, Kristen has to do this. I can't help her. Sure hope she doesn't fall to her death right here. And it was like, it was just awful to think that. So I talked to these hippies on the beach about like getting a boat ride out. And they said, it'll be $150. Wait behind those bushes. We'll come back in an hour. We got another couple to take out. And in that walk back to where our camp was, I got so angry with myself for like thinking that we were going to take this easy way out. And we broke down camp and we ended up hiking out. And it was on that hike out over Crawler's Ledge, the really notorious section, where I thought, man, like what if something bad happened right here? And what if somebody decided like, you know what, I'm never going back. I'm kind of drawn to the idea of like escaping from everything. And this is something that kind of runs through my books. If you've read Tailwinds, you know that. So I thought like, wow, like what if you just kind of went and hung out with those people and, and just kind of tried to disappear. And as I read more about Kalalau Valley over the years, I learned that some of the camps back in the valley were so established, they even built a pizza oven. And there was like urban legend, but true, that if you showed up with Bisquick and a joint, they would make you pizza. And then like these guys were out there for months, sometimes years at a time, for decades. There's a huge garden. It's a whole big thing. So from that little idea, I just started kind of ruminating on it for years and wanting to get back. And then finally I did get back for a couple times while researching this book.
We missed the Bisquick story after all this time. We knew about
it was
goats,
all I could do to not include that in the book. I could not include it in the book because I want it to be completely fiction, and I didn't want to accidentally make anybody think that I was actually writing about them.
Mm-hmm. Makes total sense. So you take a really dangerous situation that you were in and you decide to put a teenage girl into it. Did you know from the start that that was going to happen, or how did that evolve?
You know, I got asked this last week in a book fest I did, and I can't remember when or how, let me rephrase that. I can't remember how I pivoted from middle-aged dude to 19-year-old girl. I know that originally the idea was like a guy on the trail, something really bad just happened, and he had like a fancy Sunto GPS watch with all the bells and whistles, and he was like, you know, just kind of trying to like let that be his saving, his lifeline. And then he goes back, and somewhere between then and 2.5 years ago, I realized like I wanted to have, you know, a guy like not even my age, a little younger, be in the book, but I didn't want it to be centered around him. And because I didn't feel like the emotional level would be there if it was just, you know, around some like tech bro that, you know, wants to get away from it all, like Edward in Tailwinds Past Florence, and who went kicking and screaming into that adventure because of his wife. But so I decided, like, you know, I need somebody else. I need somebody female. I need somebody maybe younger. And I can't really say what led me to this, to have Malia, but I can say that Malia was originally 17 in my early version. And my critique group was like, no. Because like Malia in the opening chapter of the book, she's naked surrounded by police. And they were like, no. So I was like, okay, what about 18? And there was a mother in our critique group who's no longer in the group. And she was like, I got a teenage daughter. Can she be a little older than 18? Because I'm still having a problem with some of the scenes you're putting in here. So then I was like, okay, she's 19. She's on her way to college. She got held back a year to increase her odds of getting into this elite prep school. And everybody was like, okay, all right, if she's 19 and on her way to college, we can buy this. So that was there. But then of course, the main character who was in my mind years and years ago, he ended up actually, I don't want to say he's the antagonist. There's a lot of potential antagonists in this story, but he is a person of interest. I wish I had a better answer. I should have written it down. Although I did find my initial notes for this book from 2.5 years ago, and the working title that I originally came up with was Runaway Valley.
I remember that.
So that was what it was originally called. So I guess pretty early on, I had the idea of a teenage girl running away and then falling in with the squatters.
All right. Let's see. Sorry, I have a list of questions that I can choose to ask Doug about, depending on what he answers previously. So you've been back to Kauaʻi several times at this point for research and for, you know, most people go to weddings and they just get drunk and they have fun, but no, you go hike one of the hardest trails there is. So tell us about what it's like to write places that you travel. Obviously, it's fun to be able to travel to places as an author, but these locations seem to get really just like folded into everything you write. Speak about like what these locations mean to you and into the writing and how it drives the plot and the characterization.
Oh, wow. That's a good question. And a lot to it. That's a lot to unpack. My very first trip to Hawaii was in 1996 for a geology course studying volcanoes. And that was my first time going anywhere other than to Florida with some high school friends for a couple to see his brother. So this was like a huge thing for me that just left such an imprint. And I knew, like, even back then, like in 96, like, okay, travel is going to be something that's hugely important to me in my life. And it's through these trips that we've done, whether it was the big bicycle tour that inspired Tailwinds or these repeat trips to Kauai, it's my way to take something that was super special to me in the moment and make it permanent by writing a story about it. Because I really think I've always been the type of person who, you can tell me something 8 times and I might not remember, but if I write it down once, then it's gonna always stick with me. And I think and I take lots of photos, but they're still not the same. So that is part of almost like commemorating my own memories in these trips. I don't read fantasy and I don't read science fiction. So I don't trust myself to create worlds from whole cloth. Like I don't trust myself to do that. I'm much better taking places that I've been. And also, I used to want to be a travel memoirist or a travel essayist. And so I think that was because that was what I read so much of, and that was where I was going with a lot of my what I expected to write. It just feels natural to just kind of hone in on those things that would make a good travel memoir, but then interject them with fictitious characters and all sorts of tension and drama and people dying and, and people falling in love too. It's not just all, it's all not all bad stuff too. But that to me just seems like where my niche is. It feels what's natural to me.
Well, having read Tailwinds and Shadows now, I could definitely say it beats the travel slides of yesteryear. Having been to the, neither of the locations for your books, I feel like I've been there. So there's definitely the sense that when I read one of your novels, I have gone on vacation vicariously through you. So
thank you. And one of the first people to read my book was is another author in the Seattle area, Kim Hornsby, USA Today Bestselling Author. She sold movies to Netflix and Hallmark. And when she was, she got halfway through it and she wrote me back to say, I never knew you lived in Hawaii. How long did you live there?
Wow.
And I was like, you just gave me the absolute best compliment you could have, and you didn't even realize you did it. So that was good.
Wow.
That made me
well
feel
deserved.
Thank you.
Well, another question that authors tend to get over and over again, because we love to know, is when a writer puts a lot about themselves into the book, you wonder what characters, what parts of characters, and if there's any kind of direct correlation. Obviously, Jordan's background with video game design and things like that, people might think, okay, maybe there's a bit of Doug Walsh in Jordan. But can you speak to that, or what other characters you might see yourself in?
Oh yeah. So Jordan's background as a video game developer. I worked in video games for 16 years, or better part of 18 years, but I was not in development. But I did spend a lot of time at a lot of developers' studios. So there is definitely some of my knowledge that goes into Jordan, along with just being somebody who follows the industry really carefully. I would say personality-wise, Jordan, Holly, and Malia all have parts of me in them, and even Inoki to a certain extent. Holly's backstory matches up with mine. There's a scene where Jordan is kind of rehearsing kind of reliving some things that Holly has told him about her backstory, and that probably rings closest to my own. But none of these characters are me. I didn't put myself into any of them. There's I'll mention, since my dad's here, there's Jordan makes a bait trap out of hand. And when I was a little kid, we would go crabbing together, and there was this river. I lived in New Jersey, and there was this like nasty river that would flow out under the turnpike bridges out into towards Staten Island, and we would throw this bait trap out, and we load it up with Wonder Bread, and we pull it back in 3 hours later and get a bunch of bait fish. So there's a scene where Jordan is making one of these traps, and he says, "It's too bad we don't have any Wonder Bread around. These fish love this stuff." So that's a nod to memories that I have. Now, everything that Jordan comes, and I want to be really clear about this, everything that Jordan says after that is not me. That is fictitious character with fictitious dialogue.
That's awesome.
But yeah, Holly, Jordan, Malia, I think all of them really, you
Mhm,
know.
definitely.
Some of them
Um,
say things that I wish I could say. Some of them do things I would love to have done, but
do you have any examples about that?
not on the
Oh,
record.
you tease us. You tease us, but no. um, well, obviously, to get from idea through first draft, second draft onward, takes a lot. Can you tell us about what kind of things changed from initial idea, which we know Malia was not the original main character with the original idea, but from first draft all the way to print book? What kind of things changed along the way, for the better or for the worse, or any kind of things that you wish had made the cut that didn't, or any of that?
Mhm. Originally, Malia was going to be very spunky. Like she was going to be attitude from start to finish. And that wore thin really quickly because one, it didn't really feel natural for me to write this character that was just constant attitude. And especially like we have her get arrested in the first chapter.
Mhm.
She's still a teenage girl. And she might be on her way to Berkeley with a scholarship, and she might be pretty emboldened by a lot of the things she experienced that summer, but she's still a teenage girl. So it didn't make sense to have her like in police custody mouthing off at the cops who were trying to interrogate her. It just that didn't make sense. So we had to change that. Originally, and I got to be careful to not kind of spoil anything that got only added even after beta readers went through the book. But Malia's goes to the valley to kind of connect with her mother's spirit, her deceased mother's spirit, because her mother always referred to Kalalau as like her favorite place in the world. Hey, Rachel. And it was where Malia was conceived 20 years earlier. So Malia's quest was kind of like, I want to fall in love with this place the way my mom did. I want to connect through the valley to my mother, which it took me, pretty much all of last year and into early this year to realize like, that's not necessarily the story, or that's not really possible. And times change. Like, Malia's mother was there in the early 90s. I basically set the book in 2018. There's a couple of not like I was checking tide charts and the times of the full moon and when Berkeley would start classes and doing all this stuff. So everything matches up with 2018. There's a little Easter egg for you. But that was kind of the main thing. And now I know, Sandra, because we've talked about it, there's a particular line that got changed from the copy editor, and I kind of agreed to accept it. But there's a line on the very first page where Malia's hair is damp with tangles. And I hate that line. I had it as damp within the tangles. And I liked the way that sounded. And this sounds so petty, and it's like, who cares? But we obsess over every word when we're doing this. And like the book was like 8 to 10 drafts. And by the time I got it back from the copy editor, I'm like, accept. I didn't care anymore about like fighting, even though it was my book and I'm paying the editor. And I could have easily just declined that suggestion of change. And I did it. And I didn't really think anything of it until I was proofing the audiobook. And when it came back from the audiobook as damp with tangles, I was like nails on a chalkboard, because that was not what I wrote. And so to this day, like I won't read the opening page at a reading or anything, because I was really upset with that sentence. So that's something that so there's the big thing that changed, and then the little thing.
Mm-hmm. One other thing that I thought was an interesting process, going through as your critique partner, was the police procedure part of it. How, if you could speak a little bit, I think everybody would find it fascinating that you actually consulted a real detective for a lot of that.
Yeah.
And if you'd speak about some of the things that surprised you, that made it into the book that you might have gotten wrong if you hadn't reached out for that kind of help.
Okay, so I did consult with a detective from Seattle PD with 28 years experience bought him a beer, sat and picked his brain for an hour and a half. And there's some of our questions were about something that was a major spoiler that I can't mention. But other things like in the interrogation room, I was kind of concerned about whether it was just TV or my imagination, but if a detective would kind of like give a glance at, say, the window, the one-way mirror, and kind of like roll their eyes or make a joke and almost like communicate with the cops on the other side. And he said, oh yeah, all the time. He said that's like real cops will do that because they're only human. Whether or not they might like go out in the hallway and make jokes or comment on appearance or whatever. He said, yeah, they're human. They do these things. I had to ask questions about the helicopter, whether or not they would remove the handcuffs for a helicopter ride. And he's like, absolutely not. If the helicopter goes down, we're not really worried about whether or not they can swim because of the handcuffs. We're worried about our safety in the helicopter. We can't have somebody on handcuffs. So that was something that I kind of had to take a chance on, and I got it right, which surprised me because I thought like, oh, well, we're going to put you in a helicopter. We'll take the handcuffs off just in case we crash into the ocean. But nope. Too much of it goes into spoiler territory, and
it's true.
I can't. Oh no, no, I can't. I'm sorry. No, that whole line. You can email me questions after you read the book if you have any, please. Doug@dougwalsh.com.
Definitely.
That's the problem with Tailwinds. There really wasn't going to be any spoilers. Mm-hmm. You can kind of guess what's coming, but this book there's several things, so I can't. I'm kind of limited in what I can say.
It's almost like we need an after reading party for all the little things that came to light.
Yeah.
So you touched on a bit with an earlier question about what it's like writing about real world locations. But I feel like every writer that I've spoken to worries about the details, getting the little details right for that couple of readers who've been there and absolutely will know if you weren't. So if you can kind of talk to a little bit about like your process and where your cutoff is too, about getting those minute details just right, versus just letting it go for the plot or the characters and whatnot.
I feel a follow-up question coming if depending on what I say. So I do want to get it right, and there's aspects of some of my advanced readers were people who have spent months and months of their lives in Kalalau Valley, and they came back saying that they kind of signed off on it, saying yeah, it's right. Hiking the trail. While hiking the trail, I was taking notes of like the mile markers where there was a ranger station, or like at each stream crossing, like, okay, what kind of trees grow here? What kind of fruit can I find here? When I hiked in, I spent a few days camped in the valley and just spent every day following game trails, bushwhacking, following streams, and just kind of taking lots and lots of photos. And then I later, with what's it called, Google Lens, helped identify some of the trees that I was seeing, which came in real handy. Writing down, going to the local history museum and finding out like, okay, well, what plant species and what birds live over there, but also like incorporating a lot of what I saw fictionally. Like, for example, one day I came across a rope swing and it inspired an idea for a scene. Now the setting for this swing that I wrote in the book doesn't look like my photo of the swing, but it was a good source of like, okay, here's a rope swing that can be a jumping off point. But accurately measuring the beach, accurately measuring the size, the distance from Kalalau Beach to Hanapu Beach, getting details like, okay, well, what are the waves like in the summer? What are the tides doing at different times of year? What way is the current? Like that stuff really, really matters to me. Getting it right. What fruit grows where? What there's a huge community garden that has been maintained for decades in Kalalau Valley, and I went up there and wrote down every type of fruit and plant that I can find in that valley, so that if I rattled off a bunch of stuff, people were like, no, that's real. Like that actually does grow there. So yeah, those were kind of the things in terms of what would be too far. I did not do the swim to Hanapu. Hanapu Beach. The climactic chapter takes place in Hanapu Beach, but in January, that's a one-way swim. That's a one-way swim if you're lucky. And I was there in January. And then I was there in January. So I did not ever go to Hanapu Beach. But I did eat the vomit cheese fondue. I think I described it as the noni fruit. I did taste the noni fruit, and I think I described it as like vomit fondue in the book. And that's accurate description of noni fruit.
That is some suffering for your craft right there.
Yeah, thank you.
And this is just one personal question on that for me. The goats. Can you tell us a little bit more about the goats? Because you know I love goats. Can you walk up to them? Are they aggressive? And how did they get there, if you know?
There are goats everywhere in Kalalau Valley, and I don't know where they came from. They're all over the northwest side of the island. They travel in packs of like 3 to 30. In the morning in camp, they will be what wake you up. You will hear them, they will baa constantly, and they will wake you up, and they're feeding on all the passion fruit. So like there's a scene where Malia is trying to collect all the passion fruit before the goats get to them one morning. And that's another real detail. Like I would get up and I would go and try and find all the fallen passion fruit before the goats got to them. But half the time you're like, oh, there's a good passion fruit, and you pick it up and it's already been bit open, and and the fruit's all gone, and I was just ants. But there are goats everywhere. There's a scene in the book with goats headbanging on a cliff, like they were, rearing back and slamming their heads against one another. And I did happen to see that. I hiked up this ridge, and I just happened to see them silhouetted against the sky, and it was like, they're goats, so it's not, it's not like there were grizzly bears fighting in the wild, but it was pretty cool to see that.
That is amazing. All right. We are going to shift gears a little bit before we get into viewer questions. We are going to be giving away a signed copy to the person who is the farthest away from Doug's home in Snoqualmie. So if you think that you are the farthest from Snoqualmie, type where you are in the chat, and we will figure out who's going to get a free signed copy sent to them.
Let's see. Well, I kind of know where everybody lives, and I believe the one who shares my last name is probably the furthest away. Sonia, I don't know where you are. Oh,
we do have in Atlanta.
David's in Atlanta.
Oh,
I did not know you were in Atlanta. Okay.
All right, we're gonna have to do some Google Maps on this one.
I got it right here. We already know my father's hometown is 2,800 miles away. We are going to check this out. The distance from my house to Atlanta, because I want to be accurate, it is actually less by car to Atlanta than New Jersey. So it looks like Joseph is going to win a signed copy. Did anybody else mention in the chat?
We have not Bellevue.
No, not Bellevue.
I know we have Kentucky, but I don't think that's farther than Atlanta or New Jersey.
Kentucky's a little closer. I think New Jersey's going to win it. I know Colorado doesn't win it. All righty. Okay, well, we did that.
Okay.
I had a list of questions that Sandra was gonna ask me, and I think there's one or two that you skipped over, but we don't have to get to them if you don't want to. I think you were dancing around one of them, but that's fine. You choose not to embarrass me.
Now I want to figure out which one it was.
Anyway, we can move on.
You were just dropping the teasers left and right on this one. So yeah, let's jump into the viewer questions that we have.
Yeah.
I was seeing that there were quite a few being dropped.
All right.
Yeah, so now we're going to hand it over to Kristen.
Yep.
All right. So I think the first one was from Amy Lee, and it was, how do you pick the name for your heroine?
Ooh, that's a really good one. One of the sources for questions that I end up using is college sports teams. So I went on to University of Hawaii's website, and I just started looking at all the names of their football team and their women's basketball team and their women's soccer team. And That's where I normally get like last names. Malia, I knew I did not want to do Kalani because that would have just been too like on the nose, too obvious. Like that's the name that like Hawaiian girls are always named in movies and things. So from there, I think I ruled that out before ever. And like Noah, I think I was considering Noelani at one point, and then just kept kind of looking at different directories of students at University of Hawaii until I found a girl that had a name that kind of jumped out to me, and that's where I got her first name, Malia. Just seemed like a really pretty name, but I wanted a name that you can kind of it didn't ring like you weren't likely to associate it with like another character or a certain appearance, so that you can kind of formulate how she looked in your head.
Great, thank you. That's
That's
interesting.
a good question.
Yeah. Here's another one. This will be a little bit easier. So this is from Ruth Schemmel. If I didn't butcher it, okay, thank you. Would you say the book is appropriate for a middle school audience? I know your protagonist is older than that, of course. Question from a librarian friend.
No. I would not. Actually, there is an educator who left so on NetGalley, which is for advanced reviews, you have reviewers, booksellers, librarians, and educators. And an educator left a review for it just yesterday. And she said one of the things that she specifically said was that though the book stars a teenage girl, this book is not appropriate for anybody who is not on their way out of high school or into college years. Like I think she kind of, I think she may have mentioned anyone under 16 would not be appropriate. So.
All right. Interesting. We were just talking about that last night.
Sex, violence, nudity, profanity, it's all in there. Not overwhelmingly, but it's, yeah.
All right. And Jeffrey Butterworth had a question on who did the art design for your cover. It's definitely a catchy cover. It will pop off store shelves.
Her name is Jenny Kimura, and it's an interesting story how I found Jenny. So part of my process with this book, middle-aged white guy writing a book about a 19-year-old Hawaiian girl, is I hired a sensitivity reader. And for those who don't know, a sensitivity reader is somebody who, is going to, who represents that population that you might be writing about, and kind of does a check to make sure that you're not relying on stereotypes, that you're treating it with dignity, with respect, and that you're getting your facts right. There's an aspect of the book that required a lot of research and history that I was going into, that I wanted to make sure it was not going to be like, appropriated, or that I wasn't like running afoul of like cultural appropriation charges and things like that. But also the fact that this 19-year-old girl is nothing like myself. So I had to remember the question again. So I ended up, I was Googling like Hawaiian sensitivity readers, and there's not a lot of them. I did find one. But one of the things that I found in my search was an old Twitter thread from another author whose publisher was saying they had to find a sensitivity reader. And this woman, Jenny Kimura, was like, hey, I do this on the side. So I reached out to Jenny, and she said, I don't do that anymore. I don't have time. But it turns out she is, by day, a book cover designer for Little Brown, big publisher in New York City. And she mostly does children's covers. But when I was looking at her portfolio, she did a lot of freelance work that was for concerts and other promotions in Hawaii. So I reached out to her to see if she ever did adult covers, and she was just like, yes, that's like what she does by night, and she loves to do adult covers. And when I told her about the book, she was like, oh my gosh, like perfect, because she is Hawaiian. She lives in Brooklyn now, but it was a chance for her to use her design skills on an adult book set in her home state. So she was pretty thrilled about it. But yeah, I agree. She did a phenomenal job.
Cool. So now we're on to some really hard questions, I think. So this is another from Amy Lee, and
Okay.
it's what kind of emotional turmoil did you experience while writing the book? And what bizarre words would show up in your search history? And you can do in either order.
There's a scene, there's a couple of scenes that actually definitely get the heart rate going, and get very emotional. But there's a scene late in the book where I teared up on the first draft. I cried, I think, on the third or fourth draft, and then even when I was like reviewing like the final version, and I kept dialing up the heat on it, and the emotion. And yeah, I mean, even if I read it out loud, like to myself or my dog, I will tear up reading that. So there's one particular scene late in the book, and of course it would be a huge spoiler to mention it. There's another scene though where, actually I didn't even think this. There's a scene involving a lengthy swim. And that scene gets my blood pumping. Like I get like just amped up when I'm like reading that scene, and when I was writing it in particular. There's just, you're in Jordan's head, and there's just scenes. There's some of the thoughts that he's having and his emotion at that moment. That like I could feel my heart going up when I'm reading that scene. So, and when I was writing it in particular. So was that the full question, or was there another part of it?
The second half, that was the first half. The second half was what bizarre words would show up in your search history?
Ooh, besides vomit fondue? No. I definitely had to spend some time looking into depredation of a body, from being in the water for too long, and sharks, and how realistic, how do you keep a body safe on the beach from getting picked apart by crabs and fish, and or seagulls rather, not fish, they don't come up on the beach. So yeah, some searches like that would probably, I don't know, certain words, I don't know. Oh, see, this is where my memory just fails me. I'm sorry.
Well, we have some other good ones.
Okay.
And so this is if you're comfortable answering it, how many pages was your first draft versus your finished product? And this came from Jeffrey Butterworth.
I don't know. I wish my process was that linear. It's not. I never. So going forward, I hope to have a finished first draft of a full story before I start revising, but that's just not the way I work, because I knew I would be reading a scene every Wednesday night to my critique group. I probably read them the first third of the book was on its third draft before I ever even got through writing the end of the book. So I really can't say. The final copy ended up at 116,000 words, which is 20,000 words longer than my first book. But I definitely was cutting a lot. Like when I was revising between third and fourth draft, I was cutting anywhere from 5 to 10% per chapter. So it was probably, I would say, 125, 130,000 words.
Wow. All right. Well, this is another good question. So this comes from David Feldstein, and it's, what was your most surprising aha moment as you were writing this book and after you finished it? It could be about you, the book, your supporters, or even your detractors if you have any.
Oh, I'm sure they're out there. No, the best aha moment was just a couple of months ago when I was when I had gotten all the feedback from beta readers, and I finally realized what Malia was there for. And this isn't too much of a spoiler, but I summarized it this way the other night, and I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. It's when I finally realized that paradise is not a place, it's a with whom. It's not a where, but a with whom. And it took me until just a few months ago to realize that was what Malia had to understand. And that was the biggest aha moment there was, because then it was like, okay, now I feel ready to release this book. Like it was at that point when I was like, okay, now everything makes sense. Like everything kind of tied together, and I just had to find that through line, and I hadn't found it actually until I was almost ready to send the book to the editor.
I remember getting that message when you texted me. You're like, I got it. I totally remember that text.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. I think we have time.
It was the moment I went from thinking like I have a good book to like something like oh no, this might be very good. Like it was in that moment, because even up until that point I was like, I can't put my finger on it, but there's something missing. There's something missing. So no, those are great questions.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. We have time for one more question.
Okay.
So this comes from Rachel Hopkins, and it says, Doug, I loved your book. Having backpacked the Kalalau on your honeymoon, no doubt.
Oh, God.
I was, that's my addition, but.
And she's still married, by the way. We know this.
I was super impressed with your descriptions. I missed the beginning of the meeting, but when do you do your detailed research?
After I have the idea, like I think just, kind of wandering the earth is like where the initial ideas kind of pop into head. Like I have an idea for a story set in Appalachia in the Smoky Mountains. I have an idea that I've been nursing for like 18 years. I have an idea set for a story that would be set in like Greece. That's almost like a throwback to those like 90s erotic thrillers like Basic Instinct and Fatal Attraction, like kind of something more along those lines. But it's after I get the ball rolling and kind of commit to the project where I feel like I'm ready to like make return trips and do that. Like with Tailwinds, I wasn't going to relive the whole bicycle tour because that took 2 years, but I knew enough. But this, I went back a couple times for it to get everything right. But not until I was, as Jordan says late in the book, until I was pot committed, there was no going back and I was committed to the project.
Right.
It's hard, Kristen goes off to work every day and it's hard to be like, hey, I'm going to go down to Hawaii for research for a few days. You cool with that? And so far she's been okay with it, but
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to toss it back to Sandra well, you know what you're doing.
You think so?
Well, if I see what you're doing, it takes away everything.
We have an agenda.
We do. Again, hopefully everything that you've heard tonight encourages you to go out and buy the book immediately, especially going into Christmas. The gift of books is an awesome thing. And Kristen's going to drop the links again one more time, just so you have an easy access to.
She did.
Yes, she's good. She's real good. We are also going to go into the final giveaway. For everybody who asked a question, you're going to be entered in for the 3 digital copies, which Kristen is going to figure out as we're chatting. I did find that question I missed, by the way, Doug.
Oh, yeah, go for it. I knew it was coming.
Well, while we're figuring out who the winners are, it'd probably be a really fun one. I can't believe I went over this one. I was like so excited to ask this. So this goes back to the on-site research about skinny dipping for Malia. With it being so authentic, you had so much emotion and build to that. Did you try it?
So there's a lot of nudity at Kalalau Beach these days. There was, and I knew at this point, by the time I got there, that was just last January, I knew Malia was going to spend a fair amount of the book, at least topless. Originally, it was going to be like full nude, but there's another character who does that. And I was sitting on the beach one day and I was like, those 2 guys over there are naked. That couple's naked. And then this like Pippi Longstockings girl comes streaking by me like a stork. And she is described very, very accurately in the book. And I was like, you know what? I got to know what this feels. I spent a lot of time in the ocean. I started surfing when I was 16 years old, but I had never gone without trunks. And I was like, you know what? Let's see what this is like. And not only because I wanted to would it feel different? I wanted to know if I wrote this scene for Malia, which I wasn't committed to doing just yet, but I wanted to know what it felt like taking the suit off that first time, walking to the water, hoping no one sees you or is staring at you. And then it was in the return trip where I had oh wait, no, this part's different now because now I'm walking towards everybody. So yes, I did, and yeah, and nobody cared. I mean, the beach is like a mile long. There's like 20 people there, so But yes, that was. I saw that in the notes of questions. And I was surprised you didn't ask that, but. Yep.
Well, I mean, saving that for the end was really great, because if you have any doubt about buying this book at this point, that's the kind of research that went into this book. So, again, thank you guys for turning out and for supporting an indie author. Again, please consider gifting the book for the holidays, having a copy for yourself. And Kristen is going to announce the 3 winners for the digital copies.
Yeah.
All right, our 3 winners.
If I may.
Oh, yeah.
Doug, I had the privilege of seeing you in person this past Saturday. Thanks for coming to New Jersey.
Oh, yeah.
Great. So I would like to award the book you were going to send to me for being the furthest away.
Uh-huh.
Send it to the guy in Atlanta, the second furthest away.
Oh, okay. We'll do that. Actually,
I have a
somebody else joined since then. Kristen Sands, I see. Where do you live?
I'm in Basking Ridge, New Jersey.
Which is right down the road from there. So we'll take care of Atlanta also. Atlanta is David is an old fraternity brother of mine. So we'll take care of David, but the signed copy will go right down the road from one zip code to the neighboring one. So that actually works out pretty well. Thank you.
Thank you.
So
All right.
That's great.
Well, as for the digital winners, that just feels like a good segue. So the first winner was David Feldstein, our Atlanta participant.
Okay.
So either way, you get a copy. And the second draw was Ruth Schemmel. If I can screw up the name one more time, I am so sorry. And then the third is Jeffrey Butterworth.
All right.
So congratulations, everyone. And thanks for all the questions.
All right. Well, listen, just, thank you so much for joining. This was fun. I really appreciate the support. So those of you on the East Coast staying up late, I appreciate that. And for everybody else, just the encouragement and, sharing links on Facebook. And, I saw a lot of the activity that people were doing the past couple of days, and I really, really appreciate it. It goes a long way. And I just, I'm debating what between 2 new projects are that I'm actually going to dive into next. There's 2 that I'm tossing back and forth, but you'll be among the first to know once I dig in. So thank you. You all kind of inspire me to keep going, and hopefully the next book gets even better. So thank you.
And once more, congratulations, Doug.
Oh,
Yay.
thank you. All right. Okay, well, speaking of those weekly 7 Wednesday night critique groups, I got a couple of people who probably want to read me a scene. So
Yeah, there is no rest for you.
no, not tonight. All right, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Congrats. Good night.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.